West tone here in the garden. It's mid-October in the Northland, in the Northwoods. Just wrapping up the garden for the season. Wanted to show you some of my fertility hacks, how I feed certain crops according to the Soils and Sink infographic. So in this bed here, we still have rutabagas, which are in the Brassica family. One little kale plant here. Also happen to be a little volunteer over on this side, and I guess I shouldn't say little because this thing's pretty big. These are very sandy soils here, so these soils leach nitrogen, leach nitrates real bad. So it's very hard to grow brassicas. I have to apply nitrogen fertilizer. Well, I don't mean synthetic fertilizer, I mean forms of nitrogen a few times throughout the season in order to keep these things going. And even then, they don't turn out the greatest, but there's some decent ones in there. Anyway, you can see here, I get coffee grounds, and you can see the leftover coffee grounds. I just put a few on there. Coffee grounds have a carbon to nitrogen ratio. Oh, what is it? I'll have to check the infographic, 15 or 20 to 1. So it's relatively high in nitrogen. Good stuff for the brassicas. I can get a lot of coffee grounds, so I spread some coffee grounds out through here. That's a nice kind of slow release nitrogen source. I also plant peas and beans along this fence all the time. So there's a little bit of nitrogen there, but doesn't really add too much to the situation. So with this, I call this a high nitrogen bed. I guess I did also have green beans along the edge too, which, may or may not contribute to some degree. But you can see leaves, it's fall, the leaves are blowing in, so I don't put leaves. I wouldn't put leaves on brassicas. They're starting to fall in place now, but like I said, so coffee grounds and maybe some supplemental nitrogen from the urine diverting toilet on this bed throughout the season. Here we have a little corner of blueberries. I made a post recently where I got some pine needles from a neighbor. Underneath there we have wood chips from previous years, but those are slowly breaking down. Probably put too dang many pine needles on here. Actually, I should probably get rid of some. Moisture can have a hard time penetrating, but there's wood chips down there, and those are from a pine tree as well. I'll have to prune these, but I don't put any coffee grounds. I don't put any other nitrogen sources. That's the only source of fertility that I put on the blueberry plants. Here in the carrot bed, these, I use a leaf-based compost. I'll sprinkle some coffee grounds throughout here too, just kind of thin. Not nearly as much as I would on the brassicas, but that gives it a little bit of nitrogen because the leaves are a little bit too carbon dense for the carrots, but they don't look like much. We had these planted really thick, so I had like double rows with 6 rows in here. So we harvested the early crop, and then the later crop is still in here, and the tops don't look like much, but they do produce really nice carrots. That sandy soil allows deep root penetration, so the carrots do get pretty nice, even though the tops don't look real nice. But again, I think I had them planted too thick this year, so they probably didn't develop quite as nice as they would. I had a few places in here where I threw a row of beets in, and I don't fertilize those, and I already harvested the biggest ones. There's just a few stragglers left, but anyway, so that's how I fertilize the carrots. I use a well-rounded compost with a little bit light on the nitrogen side. Here's my raspberries, which I just finished pruning. The only thing I fertilize these with is leaves. I have a pile of leaves right there, so I'm going to grab those and mulch the raspberries. There's some back here too with leaves. If you don't have leaves, you can use straw. but I don't put any coffee grounds on these, and no nitrogen supplement, or no, I should say no green materials, no nitrogen rich materials, just leaves, just straw, feeding according to how nature does it. You only see raspberries growing in duff pastures or under trees where they get relatively rich carbon deposits. So I had a real thick layer of leaves, and I can see now that there's some bare spots, so I do need to reapply leaves there. This bed here was beets. I planted a late oats and peas cover crop here, but it was a little too late, so those didn't really develop much. This is what my oats and peas look like. These were potatoes. I had planted early potatoes in here, and once I harvested the potatoes, I don't want nothing growing in there, and I just didn't have time to plant another food crop, and I don't need that much food. So oats and peas are a real cheap, easy, effective cover crop. The oats will take up some of that nitrogen that might otherwise leach. The peas will provide some nitrogen that'll aid the oats, and in the end you've got basically a straw mulch. I'm gonna try to tamp this down a bit just so it's not all sticking up, so that next spring I got a nice flat straw mulch basically that I'll probably just plant potatoes into again. I did sprinkle some coffee grounds over this patch too. This is so between the coffee grounds and the peas and the oats, it's probably a little bit on the nitrogen rich side. I could probably sprinkle some brown leaves in here, which actually that's not a bad idea. I probably will do that just to shift that carbon to nitrogen ratio a little bit more carbon rich. Since I'll be planting potatoes, which don't need a tremendous amount of nitrogen, so I probably will sprinkle some leaves on this bed too. Here I've still got parsnips growing. I treat these pretty similar to the carrots, just a early kind of leaf-based compost, just sort of a well-rounded compost early in the spring, and then if you can sprinkle some leaves on there or some straw on there after they've come up a little bit. You don't want to smother them, especially the carrots are real delicate. But a nice carbon mulch leaves or straw are good for the carrot family. This bed here, I'm trying to kind of build up this row up against the edge, but I just grow peas and beans along this fence. I'm going to be planting garlic actually in this row, just because. So I plant peas and beans along the fence, and then I can get a row of lettuce or spinach. Spinach is a good companion with the peas and beans since they're nitrogen fixers. Spinach will do well with nitrogen, and plus again my soils are very hard to hold nitrogen. So here I had peas and oats cover crop, which I tamped down, crimped down, and then I sprinkled some coffee grounds over, so I'll have a nice mulch there to plant the garlic into. And then over here is actually where I planted the garlic before. I had some leaves there, but just kind of a balanced carbon and nitrogen ratio there. The oats and peas didn't develop quite to maturity. They were kind of in the earlier mid stages, which means the carbon and nitrogen residue that they leave is more on the nitrogen side. The older and more mature they get, the more carbon dense they get, the higher the carbon to nitrogen ratio, which you can see on the infographic. So this probably has a relatively high nitrogen, relatively low carbon and nitrogen ratio, but it'll be good for the garlic. So that's how I custom feed my garden according to nature, according to the Soils in Sync infographic. And hope you learned something.
If this video helped grow your soils, you can help grow the channel by doing these things, and tell your friends and family about it too. Without you, I'm just some fool speaking into the cosmic void. Westone here. See you in the next one.